the farmer to the florist, from the baker to the bookkeeper, and everyone in between. Welcome to Your Country Business. Welcome to episode 2 of Your Country Business, the show that is all about sharing the stories and experiences of business owners and community leaders out in the bush. I'm your host, Shane Sellers, fellow country business owner, and on today's show, we're talking with Camille Johnson, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Golden West Apprenticeships. Your Country Business is proudly brought to you and produced by Clear Logic Solutions. As a fellow country business owner, Clear Logic Solutions is my business, and without it, we wouldn't be having this podcast here. So if you need any assistance with developing your business systems to manage risks, drop us a line. We help with strategic planning, improving how you do business through systemization, and also work health and safety and a range of other services that we can help you improve your business. So check us out at clearlogicsolutions.com.au. As episode 2 of Your Country Business, we'd really appreciate it if you could interact with us on our social media pages. Tag a mate, share the story today, or just say good day in a message or a comment. We'd really like to hear from you. We'd like to spread the word of the stories and experiences of country business owners. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, and we're also on YouTube, and our podcast is streamed to a lot of different services. So say good day and spread the word of Your Country Business. But that's enough from me today. Let's jump into today's interview. Today on the show, we've got Camille Johnson from Golden West Apprenticeships. Camille's the Chief Executive Officer for Golden West Apprenticeships, who originally grew up out in Mitchell in the Maranoa, now a resident of Roma. So thanks very much for coming on the show, Camille.
Thank you so much for having me, Shane.
Camille, tell us a little bit about, first of all, just tell us what Golden West Apprenticeships does. Probably a good place to start.
Yep, so Golden West Apprenticeships is a group training organisation. We are the legal employer of almost 200 apprentices and trainees across the region. So our footprint goes from Longreach to Emerald, down to Gatton, and pretty well south to the border.
Yep.
So quite a big footprint.
Righto. So I know talking previously before the podcast, obviously Golden West Apprenticeships has been around for quite some time. So just share with us, your knowledge of how Golden West originally came about, and if you got some insight into those early days, what led to its development.
Yep. So I'll probably start with the group training concept. That's a good place to kick off. So the concept of group training came about in the 1970s, primarily through the construction and automotive industry, that those industries were seeing some large peaks and troughs in their workforce demands, and they were having some difficulties in terms of creating a stable workload for the engagement of their apprentices. So the concept of group training was devised to allow apprentices to rotate to businesses that needed the labour, and then when their workloads dropped off, they rotated through to another business that was seeing some work. So that's how the group training concept was started. In terms of Roma, it was in the late 1980s. They were having a few challenges in terms of securing skilled workers locally, but there was a lot of economic uncertainty in the late 1980s, which made that 4-year commitment for an apprenticeship a little bit of a concern for some businesses. So they looked at the group training concept. Barry Braithwaite was actually the chairman of the steering committee, and a number of other local businessmen joined him, and they formed the board, which then started off what in those days was known as Golden West Group Training Scheme, Inc.
Yep. So at those early days, once that board was established, how many employees did they have back in the 1980s to kick it off?
So we were established on the 21st of September 1988, and we had just one employee. Over the first few years, there was a lot of government investment into trade training, so we did see the apprentice numbers grow quite quickly. They have probably hit their peak around the mid to late 1990s, and then they've stabilised, and probably in the last few years there's been a bit of a decline nationally in apprenticeship numbers.
Yep. So I guess we're looking from roughly the 1980s, almost 30, 40 years, fast forwarding, over that time frame from one employee to what does Golden West Apprenticeships look like now?
So our objects are still the same. We are here to support our communities in their efforts to train locals in skills and trade apprenticeships. So the original thinking is still the same. However, obviously in that times, there's been a lot of changes in terms of how training is delivered through TAFEs and other training organisations, as well as some of the changes and complexities you've seen in the industrial relations space. So there has been a lot of change in that time, but the fundamental rationale for Golden West and group training is still very sound today.
So still keeping back to that core objective, the core principles of the organisation. So obviously there's been some growth from that one employee in the 1980s. So what does, I guess, the makeup or the structure of Golden West look like now?
Yep, so we've got almost 200 apprentices and trainees across the region. Internally, we have 17 staff, including myself, and we have offices in Roma, Dalby and Toowoomba.
Yep. So Camille, from I guess your personal story, how does a Mitchell girl turn into, I guess, come into Roma and then become the CEO of which with 17 employees, a reasonable size employer out in the region. So when did you originally start with Golden West?
Yep, so I started with Golden West on the 28th of March 2001 as a trainee in business on the front counter. And my first full-time job out of school, I was earning $190 a week. Like, I was very wealthy, I thought. And so I started that job, and throughout the time I completed that traineeship and then a second traineeship with Golden West, and Roma is the head office, which means we've got a lot of departments based here in Roma, and without knowing it, wherever there was a gap, I tended to get rotated into a different part of the organisation. So I would move into the payroll department, and I worked in payroll for 2 years, and then there was a gap in finance, so I came back into finance, and I just tended to rotate my way through the organisation. And at the time, I probably didn't realise the skills and knowledge I was building. In time, I became the admin manager for the organisation, and I spent, I think, 12 years in that time from trainee to admin manager, and then I decided I needed a bit of a break, experience something new. So I took 3 years out and worked with one of our local resource companies, which was a very big change, going from a small not-for-profit to a multinational. Very good experience and exposure to develop, I think, more skill sets. And then I was approached by the old CEO. He was retiring, to come back in 2016, and I returned. So
back as the CEO. Wow, that's cool. So with, I guess, you've got the history there with the organisation. Then from that period of, I believe it was 2001 to obviously now, even with joining the other organisation, and that, what have you seen? Especially for a reasonable size organisation in the region, what have you seen as some of the challenges during that, the growth phase from 2001 to now?
Some of the challenge has always been our geographical location and the spread of where we do business. The tyranny of distance has always been a large cost imposition on the business, and finding ways to still deliver a quality service to both our host employers and our apprentices and trainees, so they know that we're there to support them. But managing that face-to-face cost has always been a challenge. Other challenges that we've seen over time have been the attitudes of workers to apprenticeships. there was quite a shift, I suppose, around that late 1990s to early 2000s where trades became a dirty industry and there was a big push into universities. So from that time, you have seen a decline in apprenticeships. There's also been more emphasis on parents for students to go to university and complete grade 11 and grade 12. So we've seen the average age of an apprentice become older as well. So for us at the moment, that age is 19, which is obviously older than what the average apprentice would have been, say, 20 years ago. And there's also some challenges that you see with the generational gap between young millennials stuck on their phones to, a baby boomer tradesman that, just give them a kick in the pants to get them moving.
Yeah, so it's that different differences in those age groups. You mentioned one thing about the tyranny of distance and, doing business out in the bush and the younger demographic and that. And I know, I think it was for the Maranoa region, there is that dip in the demographic, which seems to be where they leave year 12, they tend to go away either to uni or they go to the coast to try and, there's more opportunity or funner things to do there. So I guess, a lot of businesses out here have those challenges, especially, probably in the apprenticeship and trying to get the skills and the people into their business. But have you been able to leverage any benefits, I guess, of living out in the bush and working out in the bush as opposed to, the negative side of it?
From a personal sense, it's great knowing work's 5 minutes from home. That is definitely beneficial. The other benefit that is often overlooked from both a blue collar to a white collar worker as well is that our apprentices that are based in our rural communities tend to have so much breadth and exposure to work, whereas in more urban areas they tend to be very specialised, requiring a lot more rotation through other employers. So you'll have apprentices that will only work on form work, whereas an apprentice out here that's a carpenter will work on absolutely everything.
And I guess your work experience is probably a bit of a testimony to that too, really, isn't it? Like being able to have the work experience, even in the one organisation. And I think it is one of the benefits of business out in the bush is that if you're just an admin person, well, you're not just an admin person. You're actually you do a bit of finance and HR and marketing and everything else. You probably run the social media pages for a small business.
My trainees do that.
Your trainees.
I don't have Facebook.
I'll have to change that one. So, that there is those benefits of that. And I think it is overlooked a lot out in the bush. And even with the commute times and that sort of stuff, like it is great that you can just duck down to the shops. And I usually get caught off guard when I go away to to a metropolitan area and you're sort of on the country time and look at your clock and go, oh, we've got 5 minutes to get there, and then you usually turn up an hour late, not taking into account traffic and that. So have you found I guess being able to draw in some more apprenticeships and people into the region when you go out to market to try and fill that, or is it still a big barrier to try and attract the younger generation back to the country?
There certainly are some challenges, particularly with attracting people between regions. And from an apprenticeship point of view, it does become a little bit more challenging with a lower wage rate, as you could imagine. So not only are they relocating, they're also on a low wage. So that rental cost, whereas if they're staying in their home community, they're generally living with mum or dad for the first 12 months or 2 years. So it can be challenging. That said, though, we've been very lucky with some of our later stage apprentices and in more recent times that have lost their jobs through COVID-19 impacts that have relocated to our more Western communities, and they're loving it.
So probably a good time to talk about COVID-19 will be, it's the topic of the day. We're adhering to our social distancing with 1.5 with this interview, 1.5 metres. So, as an organisation that manages apprenticeships out here, how has COVID-19 impacted your business? Surprisingly, our impacts have been minimal to date, although we know that there is a lag time between what we see in our rural communities to what's been seen in metro.
We have had a handful of apprentices that have been handed back from their employers due to lack of work, and pleasingly we've been able to find new clients for them, for about 80% of them. The other impacts that we've seen are just amendments in their working hours, so from full-time down to part-time, or some have taken leave. Pleasingly, we only have a small number of apprentices and trainees in the hospitality industry, but those businesses have adapted and they're doing takeaways, and they tend to be innovating very quickly and rapidly, which is surprising. And it's a good news story for the region to see how well they've embraced technology through, if you're considering your hospitality providers, Skip and Eat Appy and all of those online apps for takeaway.
Yeah, yep. And has it affected you guys internally, like how you're running the business and administrating all that behind the scenes?
So we've been doing a work from home trial for the past couple of weeks. We've adapted quite well. The majority of our systems are web-based, so the location is not so much of an issue. For our field staff, those guys have been on the road ever since they started with us. So they are fully kitted out with laptops, scanners, printers. So working from home for them hasn't been an issue. Our biggest challenge has more so been around our HR and payroll processing. Working from home, it has tended to be a little bit slower than what we've seen when they're in the office. But that said, pays have still been processed and apprentices have been paid on time. So it's just something that we're aware of, that's a bit of a slower function than what it has been in the past.
Yeah. And with the challenges, I guess, of an organisation outside of COVID-19, so as a leader, running an organisation, I think it was 17 people, what challenges, especially, having the head office in Roma, which is really, because their office is in Toowoomba, I believe. Mm-hmm. What is there still a decision to keep the head office out in the further part of regional Queensland?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it is a board directive that our head office will remain in Roma. One of our strategies around staff succession planning is to grow our own. So we have those skill sets and that technical capability locally in Roma. As you could imagine, from time to time, it is a little bit difficult to attract staffing with certain skill sets into rural communities. So we've found the best practice has been to develop our own.
Yep. So as a leader then of the organisation, what challenges have you sort of come across, especially, being, I guess, a bit more distantly further from the other offices and that? So as a leader, what have you found the challenges with the organisation?
It's an interesting question. And I suppose being with the organisation for so long prior, those distances were known coming back into the organisation. I suppose in the last 3 years I've been very conscious about being seen in those other branches, so I've spent a lot of time on the road. More recently with COVID-19, we've introduced a lot of video conferencing for all of our meetings, and that's been fantastic. It's been really beneficial to the organisation to remain connected to each other, seen, accountable to each other.
Yep.
But in terms of distance, for me personally doing business with the team, I don't think it's a major issue.
Yeah. So I guess
just need the strategies
behind it. And as someone who's worked their way up through the ranks and that, and you've had to develop different leadership strategies and things like that, what have you found as a leader, and especially growing into those things that you've found challenging as well?
Yep. So I have a couple of personal challenges that I'm well aware of, and knowing about them makes them easier to recognise. One of the biggest issues that I found coming back into the organisation was not speaking with intent. And I'd be having meetings and be like, I feel, I think, maybe. And it was a little bit wish-washy for the team. And it wasn't until someone from outside the organisation heard me speak and they said, hey, do you know you do this? So I've been very conscious that when I'm speaking, it's been very clear-cut, not I think we should. It's we will be doing this.
Do you hear a little voice when you say something like that? Now you hear
catch
like a little
myself.
voice sort of catch you and say,
correct
"Are you
myself.
actually doing that, or are we thinking about it?"
Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned you had a few things there. What's another one?
The being courageous with my decisions. Obviously, I have a management team that support me in the role, and I like to think we act very democratically. But from time to time, there does become issues that we can't get consensus on, and someone has to make a decision, and that someone is me. So being courageous in making those big decisions and standing by them has been a difficult thing, but I'm learning that, it's a decision that needs to be made for the benefit, sustainability and viability of the organisation, and it needs to be done. So that's something else that's been a bit of a challenge. The other thing that is a bit of a struggle for me is I'm very task orientated, which also makes me a little bit of a control freak. So when we're talking around some of our planning days, I need to understand, how are we going to do this? And learning that I can let someone else manage that's also been a bit of a struggle for me. But I'm 4 years into the job now. It's getting maybe not easier, but I'm at least recognising those behaviours within myself and just letting them go, or correcting them.
And you make a good point. Like I remember I did as part of Toastmasters, I did a survey in my communication style and found out that I was 50-50 analytical and direct, which are almost completely polar opposites. And before the show, we were talking about, I think you mentioned analysis paralysis, I think it was. And,
yes.
and that, being task orientated tends to lead to a lot of almost OCD tendencies that we want everything to be 100%, and it almost conflicts against some of that, action Jackson sort of just get it done, and
Correct.
And they're always conflicting, I think, between us, as leaders. So have you sort of just managed? I remember one of my old bosses used to say, "Shane, get your head out of the rabbit hole." How do you sort of pick up then, on some things when you sort of go, "Okay, I'm spending way too much time on this"?
Yeah, when I'm probably at my 5th hour of researching something, it's like, okay, you are now just wasting time. You need to get a decision made and get this implemented. Time sometimes is not a luxury for leaders.
Yeah.
That said, though, I'm not suggesting you don't research and make sound decisions, but you need to recognise when you're going too far, and consistently the feedback you're getting is the same. You need to just put a line in the sand and move forward.
Which probably goes back to the other thing you were saying about making a decision and just sticking by it, and I think you said courageous
Being
decision.
courageous.
Yeah, and backs that up. So I guess moving from the challenges then, what have been some of the highlights of Golden West and the triumphs and successes that have been really good to share?
It's been quite exciting the last couple of years. The team, we range from an 18-year-old admin trainee right through to those, and Peter retired earlier this year. So we've got a very broad age demographic, but that also brings a very broad skills demographic. And it's been great to see over the last couple of years some of the innovation that we've been able to introduce into the organisation because of those different skill sets. So we've introduced this amazing platform. We've got a recruitment team that interview, screen and assess all of the job seekers that register with us. And so we have this pool of candidates that was great. If an organisation called up and said, "Hey, I need a carpenter," we'd be like, "Great, we've got 15 of them, ready to go." And we were like, why are we hiding this? So we've now introduced an apprentice finder platform, which is forward facing out on our website. So at any time of the day, someone can jump on and say, "I want a motor mechanic in Roma," and it brings up all of our screened candidates. And so that's been really good to see. That's probably one of the highlights, but there's been a number of small wins here, there and everywhere that has just built efficiency and innovation into the organisation.
So has leveraging some of that, innovation and using web stuff, has that sort of, grown and developed some extra skills within the team as well?
It has. One thing that we've found is a lot of those social media skills are already there with our young people, and we just need to leverage it. I'll be emailing through and it'll be like, "I need this post on Facebook," and it's almost the length of a media release. And my trainee will come back to me and be like, "Here's the draft." And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's much better. Well done.
They're definitely picking up on that skill. I think it's something with definitely with the younger generation to be able to leverage. That's like you said, you're sort of getting an employee with the skill already built in.
There.
It's awesome. I probably off the topic a little bit away from Golden West. I'd like to just briefly mention, and discuss the amount of work that you put into some of the committees on the side as well. So, are you able to share some of the committees that you're on out in the region?
Yes. So I have sat with Commerce Roma before council amalgamation. So my background there is that Commerce Roma was not overly active prior to the amalgamation of our councils. And some of the reason we found for that was Roma and the Maranoa was what you considered a donut show. You had a Roma Town Council and then surrounding councils, and the business representation on council was made up of a number of local businesses, businessmen and women. So there wasn't a real need, I suppose, to get that advocacy voice into council because it was already there because of the councillors and what their backgrounds were. At the time amalgamation started, we were like, right, we think there's going to be some change here, and it's going to be very critical as a community and a business community for us to make sure that as we go through this change with amalgamation, that our interests are represented. So we put in place a steering committee, and Rhonda Heaps from Roma Tax became our steering committee president and our president for the first 2 years. And that's how Commerce Roma has moved forward more recently. I also am sitting on the interim board of the Country University Centres, and we are waiting on our funding application. So fingers crossed that gets legs and we can have a Country University Centre based here in the Maranoa, which will be amazing. That's about it.
Yeah, and I guess are you able to share? A lot of those committees are all volunteer time and the effort, and I guess it is just the time that goes in the background. So as a local girl growing up in Mitchell and Roma, so what's the driving factor that I guess you see behind the reasons why you put your time into it, and what you're passionate about to get out of the time in those committees?
I can be a little bit selfish in my response here. So when I first joined Commerce Roma, I was quite young and very early in my management career. And I did join because my old boss was part of Chamber and I just happened to be drug along for the ride. But what I found sitting on that committee, that while they weren't teaching me, I was still learning from the knowledge and the skills that came from those different people that sat on that committee, and hearing people speak or some thoughts or ideas. It's incidental learning and it's very valuable. So even now sitting on those committees, there's still opportunities to learn. I am also very committed to our communities. I think we need to be supportive of our regions, and it's important that as a collective we work together for the betterment of the region.
I 100% agree. You sort of get that extra little community on the side around the committee that, whenever we're with other people, we pick up the things and learn a few things off them. So I guess pivoting from that into the future, obviously we're in the middle of COVID-19 and there's a lot of uncertainty in that. But casting in mind to the future, in the realms of Golden West and apprenticeships and even the community and region, do you see anything exciting on the horizon happening or things that you might be pivoting towards?
Well, I am very excited about trialling some technology around some live events. As you would be aware, the impacts of COVID-19 will limit the opportunity that we have to engage through careers markets and our engagement efforts with our schools. And I still think it's very important that school students and job seekers are aware of the benefits of a trade pathway and a trade career. So we will be looking to do some events through video and webinars, and I'm not entirely sure what it will look like coming out the other side, but I'm quite excited about that. It should be good. We've been using the Zoom video conferencing for our face-to-face contacts with our apprentices and trainees, just doing a check-in. Part of our usual service offering is we visit face-to-face every 6 weeks. That's obviously been limited as part of COVID-19. So that seems to be working very well as well.
Yeah. So I guess towards the end of the podcast here, what's some advice or one piece of advice or a key takeaway that you'd give to either another, not-for-profit or another organisational leader, or even someone that might be thinking about starting up a business out in, rural, remote Australia? So what would be something that you would like, that you would give to them as a piece of advice?
As a lifelong learner myself, I think any leader needs to understand that learning is a critical part of growth and development in any role as you transition through the different stages of your career, and not to be afraid of that. And whether it's learning through traditional means with certifications or short courses or reaching out to someone for help or guidance or direction, I think that's critical for any business leader to do.
Yeah. And that's probably goes in hand with what you're talking about before with the committees, and probably surrounding yourself with those people to, one, go and learn, formally, but then it's that informal learning, I guess, that you sort of, and leveraging the experience as well. Have you sort of, and I guess you sort of led to it there before, but has the committees helped a bit with that as well?
Oh, without a doubt. You could imagine from Commerce Roma's point of view, the different skill sets that have been on those committees, from accountants to solicitors to entrepreneurs, the learning that they give without meaning to share that knowledge is just invaluable.
Right. So lifelong learning, and always commit to learning. Mm-hmm. Okay. So as part of the wrap up, one thing I'd love to do on Your Country Business is give your business a pitch or a platform. Tell us a little bit, if you're a business owner and looking to put on an apprentice, what do you sort of offer, and where can I find out more information about that?
Great. So, Golden West Apprenticeships employ apprentices and trainees across all traditional trade areas. We've been operating across the Southwest and Darling Downs for over 30 years. Businesses use us to support their recruitment efforts, and as I said earlier, we have our Apprentice Finder platform, so we have a pool of quality assessed and screened candidates ready to go. We find that businesses using our services save a lot of time and money because we handle all of the recruitment, management, red tape and risk that goes with the apprenticeship process. And you can find us at www.goldenwest.org.au. Awesome. Or at 95 Charles Street, Roma.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much, Camille, for being part of the show. It's much appreciated. And check out Golden West Apprenticeships online at the website. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Shane.